Imagine standing at your wedding altar, heart pounding, only for Mateo to uncover a fake pregnancy belly in his fiancée's bag just minutes before vows. What he did next, handing it to her father instead of a ring, will shock you to your core. You won't believe how it unfolded.
Thanks, Eliza, for letting me share this. It's been a roller coaster, but I'm glad to turn my pain into a warning for others, showing that you can fight back with dignity and come out stronger. My name is Mateo, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. At 27, with my dark brown curls freshly trimmed and styled for the biggest day of my life, I stood in the mirror adjusting my charcoal gray tie. My brown eyes reflected back a man who believed he had everything: a beautiful fiancée, a baby on the way, and a future that stretched out like a golden highway. The scent of gardenias drifted through the open window of the groom's suite at Rosewood Manor, mixing with the nervous energy that buzzed through my chest. In 3 hours, I would marry Chloe Harrison, the blonde, blue-eyed marketing executive who had swept into my life 8 months ago like a summer storm. More importantly, in 6 months, I would become a father. My parents, Alina and Carlos, had flown in from Chicago, their faces glowing with pride. They'd immigrated from Argentina when I was 5, working double shifts at factories so I could have opportunities they never dreamed of. Now their son was marrying into the Harrison family, old money, old connections, the kind of American dream they'd sacrificed everything to give me access to. Mijo, my mother had whispered to me yesterday at the rehearsal dinner, tears in her eyes as she straightened my collar. Your father and I, we are so proud. Beautiful wife, a baby coming, a good job at the law firm. This is everything we hope for you. The memory made my chest tight with emotion. I'd worked so hard to get here, law school, the grueling hours as a junior associate, saving every penny for the engagement ring that had cost me 3 months' salary. When Chloe told me she was pregnant 2 months ago, I'd felt that familiar surge of determination that had carried me through every challenge in my life. We would make this work. We would be a family. The wedding had been rushed, sure, but Chloe insisted she didn't want to be showing too much in her dress. I want to look perfect for you, baby, she'd said, her hand resting on what I thought was our growing child. Besides, why wait when we know this is forever? Her father, Richard Harrison, had been surprisingly enthusiastic about the quick timeline. A tall, silver-haired man who owned 3 car dealerships across the state, he'd insisted on paying for the $40,000 venue, the flowers, even the photographer. Welcome to the family, son, he'd said, gripping my hand with both of his at our first dinner together. Chloe's always been my little princess, and now she's going to make me a grandfather. This calls for the best of everything. I should have questioned the generosity. I should have wondered why a man who barely knew me was so eager to invest in my legal career connections and social standing. But I was young, in love, and overwhelmed by the whirlwind of planning a wedding and preparing for fatherhood simultaneously. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly orchestrated it all was. How every conversation was designed to push me toward this moment, standing in a room that cost more per night than I made in a week, preparing to legally bind myself to a woman who had been lying to me from the very beginning. The morning of the wedding brought with it an unseasonable chill for June in Virginia. I'd been up since 5, unable to sleep, my mind racing between excitement and an anxiety I couldn't quite name. By 7, I was dressed and pacing the suite, checking and rechecking every detail. Alex arrived at 8 with coffee and bagels, though I could barely stomach either. Dude, you need to eat something, he said, watching me adjust my cufflinks for the 3rd time. You're going to pass out at the altar. Fine, I insisted, but my hands were shaking slightly. Just nervous, it's normal, right, to be nervous. Alex studied my face with the careful attention of someone who'd known me for 7 years. Nervous about marrying Chloe or nervous about something else? I paused, caught off guard by the directness of the question. What do you mean? I mean, you've seemed, I don't know, stressed lately, more than usual, and this whole rushed wedding thing. He trailed off, clearly trying to find the right words. Look, I'm happy for you, man, but are you sure about the timing? The question hit a nerve I'd been trying to ignore. The truth was, things with Chloe had felt different lately. More distant. She'd been working late constantly, often not returning my calls until the next day. When I'd suggested we start looking at apartments with a nursery, she deflected, saying we had plenty of time. When I brought up prenatal vitamins after noticing she wasn't taking any, she'd snapped at me for being controlling. She's pregnant, Alex, I said finally. We're having a baby, the timing doesn't matter. Alex nodded slowly, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Have you been to any doctor's appointments with her? The question landed like a punch to the gut because the answer was no, I hadn't. Every time I'd offered to come along, Chloe had a reason why it wasn't necessary. The appointments were boring. She could handle it. I was too busy with work, always something. She's been handling all that, I said, my voice sounding defensive even to my own ears. She's very independent, right? Alex said carefully. Of course, I'm just saying my sister made my brother-in-law come to every single appointment, said she needed the support. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Can't wait to marry you today, baby. See you at the altar. Love you so much, Red Heart. The message should have made me smile, but instead it felt hollow somehow. Performative. I shook my head, annoyed with myself for overthinking everything. This was my wedding day. I was about to marry the woman I loved, the mother of my child. I needed to stop looking for problems that didn't exist. It was during a brief lull in the photography session that I overheard Richard Harrison talking to someone in the hallway outside our suite. His voice was low, but the walls were thin. Just need to get through today, he was saying. Once they're married, it'll be harder for him to back out. His law firm connections alone will be worth the investment. But what if he finds out? The second voice was female, older, Chloe's mother, Margaret. He won't, Richard replied firmly. Chloe knows what she's doing, the kid's head over heels. By the time he figures anything out, it'll be too late. My blood ran cold. I pressed closer to the door, straining to hear more, but their voices had dropped to whispers. A moment later, I heard footsteps moving away down the hallway. At 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my world exploded. I'd been putting the finishing touches on my appearance when I realized I'd left my handwritten vows in my jacket pocket. The jacket was hanging in the bridal preparation room next door, where Chloe was having her final touch-ups with the makeup artist. I'd written those vows at 3 in the morning 2 weeks ago, pouring my heart onto paper about our future together, about the family we were creating, about the love I thought we shared. I'll be right back, I told Alex, who was helping my cousin Miguel with his boutonniere. Just need to grab something. The hallway was empty, most of the wedding party having moved to their positions for the processional. The wedding coordinator had stepped out to handle some last-minute detail with the string quartet. I knocked gently on the bridal suite door and heard no response. Assuming Chloe was in the bathroom or getting final photos taken elsewhere, I quietly opened the door. The room was empty. Chloe's wedding dress hung like a ghost in its protective bag, and her personal belongings were scattered across the vanity table. My jacket hung on a chair in the corner, and I moved toward it quickly, not wanting to invade her space for longer than necessary. That's when I saw it. Chloe's oversized designer tote bag, the one that was part of her complete dress bag ensemble, sat open on the floor beside the dress, and something flesh-colored was protruding from the top. At first glance, I thought it might be some kind of undergarment or shapewear, but as I got closer, the reality of what I was looking at hit me like a physical blow. It was a silicone pregnancy belly. My hands started shaking as I reached into the bag and pulled it out. The thing was disturbingly realistic, weighted to feel authentic, with detailed stretch marks and a protruding navel. It even had adjustable straps to secure it around the waist. This wasn't some costume piece, this was a professional-grade prosthetic designed to fool anyone who might touch or examine it closely. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the vanity table to steady myself, my brown eyes meeting my own reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me was a stranger, pale, wide-eyed, holding evidence of a deception so profound it defied comprehension. But I wasn't done discovering the extent of the lie. With trembling hands, I dug deeper into the tote bag. Beneath makeup pouches and hair accessories tucked inside a small cosmetic case, I found them. 5 pregnancy tests, all negative. Not just negative, stark, undeniably, crystal clear negative. The kind of negative that left no room for interpretation or false hope. I sank into the chair beside the vanity, the fake belly still clutched in my hands, the negative tests scattered on the table before me. Every conversation, every moment of tenderness, every plan we made for our future, all of it built on this elaborate, calculated lie. The rushed wedding suddenly made perfect sense. The generous financial contributions from her parents, the secrecy around doctors' appointments. The way she deflected every attempt I'd made to be involved in the pregnancy. She wasn't protecting our privacy or maintaining her independence. She was protecting a lie that would have been impossible to maintain much longer. I remembered last week, when I'd excitedly told my parents about becoming a grandfather over our weekly video call. My father's eyes had filled with tears as he talked about teaching his grandchild to speak Spanish, about carrying on our family traditions in America. My mother had immediately started planning to visit after the baby was born, talking about taking time off work to help with childcare. The memory of their joy, their pure excitement about a grandchild that didn't exist, made my stomach turn with rage. Walking back to the groom's suite with that tote bag felt like carrying a bomb. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. I had maybe 8 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, and I needed to appear completely normal while my entire world had just imploded. Alex took one look at my face when I entered the room and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. "Mateo, what the hell? Not now," I said quietly, setting the tote bag behind a large floral arrangement near the window. My parents were adjusting their formal wear in the mirror, my mother pinning a small silver cross, a gift from my grandmother in Buenos Aires, to my father's lapel. They looked so proud, so full of joy for what they believed was happening today. "Mijo, you look pale," my mother said, turning toward me with concern. "Are you feeling sick?" "Just nerves, Mommy," I managed, forcing what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "Big day." She cupped my face in her hands, her brown eyes so similar to my own searching my expression. "Your father and I, we are so happy for you. Chloe, she is a beautiful girl, and the baby." She placed her hand over her heart. "A grandchild we never dared to dream. All those years cleaning offices at night so you could have opportunities. This is why we came to America." The words were like acid in my chest. I covered her hands with mine, memorizing the feel of her touch, the love in her voice. In a few minutes that joy would be replaced by confusion, embarrassment, and probably anger, but it had to be done. "I love you, Mommy," I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. "Te amamos también mi amor," she whispered, then stepped back to give me space. Alex cornered me near the window, his voice low and urgent. "Okay, seriously, what's going on?" You look like you're about to throw up or commit murder. I glanced around the room to make sure no one else could hear us. Remember when you asked me if I'd been to any of Chloe's doctor appointments? Yeah, there haven't been any doctor appointments, Alex, because there's no pregnancy. His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning horror. What are you talking about? I nodded toward the tote bag. She's been using a fake belly. I found it along with negative pregnancy tests. The whole thing is a lie. Alex stared at me for a long moment, then ran his hands through his hair. Jesus Christ, Mateo, what are you going to do? I'm going to tell the truth, I said simply. But I need your help. When we get to the ring exchange, don't give me the ring box. Just step back and let me handle it. You're going to expose her at the altar in front of 200 guests. She made this public, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. She invited 200 people to witness a lie. They deserve to know the truth. The walk to the ceremony space felt surreal. The garden at Rosewood Manor was transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses and gardenias everywhere, elegant draping. Chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an altar decorated with more flowers than I'd ever seen in one place. The cost alone, $40,000, represented more than my parents had made in their first 2 years in America combined. The string quartet was playing Pachelbel's canon, and guests were settling into their seats with programs that featured a photo of Chloe and me from our engagement shoot. I took my position at the altar next to Reverend Matthews, a kind elderly man who had counseled us through our pre-marriage sessions. He smiled warmly at me and leaned over to whisper, "Beautiful day for a wedding, son. You ready for this?" "More ready than you know," I replied. Ceremony proceeded with agonizing normalcy. Reverend Matthews spoke about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage while I stood there knowing it was all based on deception. Chloe's hand in mine felt cold despite the warm June afternoon, and I noticed she kept glancing at me with growing confusion as the minutes passed. We made it through the opening remarks, the reading from Corinthians, and even a poem that one of Chloe's bridesmaids recited about the joy of new beginnings and growing families. Each word felt like another layer of irony piling onto an already absurd situation. Finally, Reverend Matthews reached the moment I'd been waiting for. "And now," he said with a warm smile, "Mateo and Chloe will exchange rings as a symbol of their eternal commitment to one another." This was it, the moment when everything would change. Alex stepped forward as rehearsed, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket where the ring box was stored, but I held up a single hand, stopping him mid-motion. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent garden, "there's something I need to share with everyone first." A confused murmur rippled through the guests. Reverend Matthews looked puzzled but maintained his composure. "Of course, son, what would you like to say?" I turned slightly so I could address both Chloe and the assembled guests. Her face had gone pale and I could see panic beginning to creep into her eyes. "When I was getting ready this morning," I began, my voice steady and clear, "I realized I'd forgot something important in the bridal suite, so I went to retrieve it. I walked over to where I'd positioned the tote bag behind the floral arrangement. The movement caused another wave of confused whispers from the guests. What I found there," I continued, reaching into the bag, "was very illuminating. I pulled out the silicone pregnancy belly, holding it up so everyone could see it clearly." The gasps from the audience were audible, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the garden. Someone in the back shouted, "What the hell?" and I could hear my cousin Miguel cursing in Spanish. Chloe's face went from pale to gray. "Mateo, what are you?" "This," I said, my voice cutting through her attempted interruption, "is a fake pregnancy belly, professional grade, very realistic. I found it in Chloe's bag along with these." I reached back into the tote and pulled out the 5 negative pregnancy tests, holding them up like evidence in a courtroom. 5 negative pregnancy tests, all recent, all clear, all hidden while she convinced me and both our families that we were expecting a child. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see people in the audience leaning forward, straining to understand what they were witnessing. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth in shock. My father's face had gone stone-cold serious. But it was Richard Harrison's reaction that confirmed everything I needed to know. Instead of shock or confusion, his face showed pure, undiluted rage. This wasn't news to him, this was a plan gone catastrophically wrong. I walked directly to where he sat in the front row, still holding the fake belly. Margaret Harrison was clutching his arm, her face a mask of horror, but Richard himself looked like he wanted to murder me where I stood. I held out the prosthetic belly to him as if offering him a gift. "I believe this belongs to your family," I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the garden. Then, looking him directly in the eye, I asked the question that would become legendary. "Is this yours?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The fury in his eyes was unmistakable, but he couldn't speak, couldn't deny it without lying in front of 200 witnesses, couldn't confirm it without admitting to the conspiracy. The crowd erupted. Shouts of disbelief, anger, and support created a cacophony that drowned out everything else. I could hear someone yelling, "Call the police," and another voice shouting, "This is insane." I turned back to face Chloe, who was now visibly shaking. "Did you really think," I said, my voice somehow cutting through the chaos, "that you could build a marriage on a lie this big? Did you think I would never find out?" "Mateo, please," she whispered, tears starting to stream down her carefully made-up face. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted. "Explain how you faked a pregnancy to pressure me into marriage. Explain how your father was in on it. Explain how you've been lying to me for months while I planned our future around a child that doesn't exist." I turned back to address the guests, many of whom were now standing, trying to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, my voice projecting clearly across the garden, I want to thank you all for coming today. Your presence here means the world to me and my family. Unfortunately, as you can see, this wedding was based on a fundamental deception. The walk from the altar to the manor's exit felt both endless and instantaneous. Behind me, I could hear the chaos continuing to erupt, raised voices crying, the scraping of chairs as people stood up to get a better view or started moving toward the exits themselves. But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward, my shoulders straight, and my pace steady. Alex caught up with me just as I reached the main hallway of the manor. Mateo, wait up. I turned to find him jogging toward me, still clutching the fake belly and pregnancy tests. His face was flushed with adrenaline, and despite everything, he was grinning. Dude, he said, slightly out of breath, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean the way you, holy shit, Mateo. Give me those, I said, taking the evidence from his hands. I want to make sure this stuff doesn't mysteriously disappear. My parents approached, my mother practically running in her heels, my father's face grim but determined. Mateo, my mother called out. Mijo, wait. They reached us, and for a moment we all just stood there in the ornate hallway while the sounds of chaos continued to drift from the garden. Are you okay? My mother asked, reaching up to touch my face. Tell me you're okay. I'm okay, Mommy, I said, and realized I meant it. I'm actually better than I've been in months. My father stepped forward and placed both hands on my shoulders. What you did out there, he said in his accented English, his voice thick with emotion, that took courage, real courage. You protected our family's honor. I'm sorry, I said, the words rushing out. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry you spent money to fly here for nothing. I'm sorry. No, my father interrupted firmly. You listen to me. Your mother and I, we didn't raise you to be anyone's fool. We raised you to be a man of integrity. What you did today, that was integrity. My mother nodded emphatically. That girl, she tried to steal your life with lies. You stopped her, you protected yourself, and you protected our family from becoming part of her deception. My phone started buzzing with text messages and calls. Word was already spreading among our mutual friends and acquaintances. I glanced at a few of the messages. Dude, did you really just expose Chloe at your own wedding? OMG, is it true about the fake pregnancy? I heard you walked out of your wedding. Call me. You okay, man? Heard some crazy stuff went down. I was about to put the phone away when I saw a call coming in from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, you son of a bitch. Richard Harrison's voice was low and deadly. You have no idea what you've just done. I know exactly what I've done, I replied calmly. I've exposed a liar and a fraud. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should have raised a daughter with better morals. You think this is over? You think you can humiliate my family like this and just walk away? Actually, yes, I do think that, I said. Because here's the thing, Richard, I have evidence of your daughter's deception. I have witnesses to what happened today, and I have a very clear understanding of what fraud and conspiracy charges look like. I hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked the number. As we stood there in the parking lot watching more guests stream out of the manor, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Yes, my life had just been turned upside down. Yes, I was going to have to deal with the fallout from this for weeks or months to come. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. 3 months later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop in downtown Richmond, laptop open, working on a brief for a client when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Sarah from a nonprofit that helped victims of relationship fraud. Hi Mateo, the message read. I hope this doesn't seem strange, but I heard about what happened at your wedding through a mutual friend. I work with people who have been victims of elaborate deceptions in relationships, and I wanted you to know that what you did took incredible courage. Would you be interested in sharing your story to help others recognize the warning signs? I stared at the message for a long moment, thinking about how much my life had changed since that day at Rosewood Manor. The immediate aftermath had been intense. A flood of social media attention, reporters reaching out for interviews, and even a few calls from producers wanting to turn the story into some kind of reality TV special. I turned them all down, preferring to let the story speak for itself. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed my cousin Miguel. Primo, his voice boomed through the speaker. You're not going to believe this. Remember that photographer from your wedding, Janet? Yeah, what about her? She just called me. Apparently the photos from your wedding have gone viral, like seriously viral. There's a whole Twitter thread about it, and someone made a TikTok that has like 2 million views. Despite myself, I started laughing. A meme? Seriously, dead serious, you're famous, man, in the best possible way. After I hung up with Miguel, I pulled up Twitter on my phone and searched for the hashtags. There were thousands of posts about the story, and the vast majority were supportive. People were sharing their own experiences with deceptive partners, thanking me for showing that it was possible to stand up for yourself, and praising what they called my dignified response to betrayal. One tweet particularly caught my attention. My ex faked a pregnancy too, but I was too scared to call her out. Seeing that Mateo lawyer handle his situation with such class gave me the courage to leave my toxic relationship. Thank you for showing us what self-respect looks like. That's when I realized the real impact of what had happened that day at Rosewood Manor. It wasn't just about me escaping a bad marriage. It was about showing other people that they didn't have to accept being lied to or manipulated, even by someone they loved. I opened my laptop and started typing a new email to Sarah from the nonprofit. Sarah, I wrote, I've been thinking about your message and I'd very much like to get involved with your organization. If sharing my story can help even one person recognize the warning signs of deception in their relationship, then I think it's worth doing. Let me know when you'd like to talk. As I was finishing the email, someone slid into the chair across from me. I looked up to see a woman about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile. Excuse me, she said, are you Mateo, the guy from the wedding story? I tensed slightly, unsure what to expect. Yes, that's me. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. My sister was in a relationship with a guy who was lying about pretty much everything, his job, his finances, even his real name. She saw your story and it gave her the push she needed to investigate and get out. She could have wasted years of her life with that guy. I'm glad she got out, I said sincerely. That took courage. She said she learned it from watching you, the woman replied. Sometimes we need to see someone else stand up for themselves before we realize we can do it too. Walking out into the Richmond afternoon, I felt the same sense of freedom I'd experienced walking down that aisle 3 months ago. The feeling of someone who had refused to settle for less than he deserved and who was finally ready to build a life based on truth instead of lies. It was a good feeling. It was the best feeling in the world, and it was just the beginning.
Mateo, your raw bravery in exposing the fake pregnancy mid-wedding highlights how one act of truth can shatter illusions and inspire others to confront deceit before it's too late. It reminds us that integrity often comes at a cost, but it's worth it for real freedom. Thank you for your story. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.